name is Christiana Urbano. I am here with the Public Library of Brookline's ideaSPACE program for another craft along video this week. We're going to be doing some collage art. And I also have with me Roy McKenzie, who is the head of the reference department at Brookline Village Library. Want to say hi, Roy?
Hi, everybody.
So
I'm very excited to be here.
He's going to be crafting along with me this week. We've both got all of our supplies ready. If you're at home, the things you might want to have with you will be some kind of piece of paper to work on, some kind of glue or Modge Podge. So I don't have Modge Podge, so I'm just going to use Elmer's glue and some water to make my own Modge Podge. And then some old magazines or books, whatever you have lying around, or patterned paper that you might want to use. I also have some paint and paint pens, but those are totally optional. You could also use Sharpies or something like that. So here's an example project of what we're kind of going to be making this week. So it's like really cool collage art type thing. I'm going to be working this is on a canvas, but this week I'm just going to be working in an art journal. So whatever you have lying around. I've also done some in clear glass frames. So if you don't have glue to kind of actually layer on like this, you could just use tape or like a glue stick rather than a liquid glue. And create something more like this. This is in a clear glass frame, but you could also just put this on a piece of paper or something like that. And you could do all of this just with tape or a glue stick if you don't have liquid glue or Modge Podge at home. So either way, both are mostly just using magazine pieces and stuff like that, stuff that you have lying around at your house. So I'm going to switch to my desk camera just so that you can see what's going on, and we'll get started.
Thank you for doing that. That's really helpful.
Great, so you can see here I've got my art journal, which is just like a basic mixed media paper, but any kind of paper will work. Something a little bit heavier is nice if you're going to be using a liquid glue so that it stands up, but you could use like watercolor paper or something like that, or just some cardstock. And worst case scenario, you can still use just regular printer paper. You just might have to be take a little more time in between layering so that you don't get too much like wrinkling happening on your paper itself. So I have that. I have a piece of parchment paper behind it because I'm working in an art journal so that I don't get goop and stuff on the next pages. I've also got some paintbrushes. I have a scraper. This is like a fancy silicone one, but if you don't have one of these, you could also just use a card, like a gift card or a library card or something like that. Something you don't mind getting glue on. So maybe not your current library card, but an old one. I've got my paint pens and some paint. I've got my Elmer's glue. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to look through the sort of scrap paper that I've gathered ahead of time and start to pick out like patterns and colors that I like that I think will go well together. And that's just going to form the base layer for the collage. So I'm going to grab that. And these are from a bunch of different things. There's postcards, old postcards, pieces of old notebooks, some magazine articles, and even some paper bags, like little gift bags that I had around my apartment. If you have tissue paper, that can be nice because we're going to be gluing this kind of on top of itself. So it's nice to have different layers of transparency. And I'm going to start just ripping out things that I like. You could also cut things if you want a cleaner edge. So the second piece that I showed you has more clean edges. I did more cutting there. But for like this kind of base layer, I want it to be a little more like natural with edges. And this isn't final at all. I'm just grabbing something that I kind of like. And in general, I don't want to have too many different colors on the base layer because you're going to put more color or something on top probably, or more like bold elements. So I want pretty neutral base. And I probably don't want more than a couple of colors. So I'm just kind of doing some cream and some pink and white. Roy, what kind of materials did you end up gathering for today?
I have animal print paper from a old damaged book that I salvaged from my home.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's got large animal prints in various colors. It's all sort of monochrome, so I should be able to draw over top of it without too much trouble. Although I'm a little jealous of the color assortment you have going on over there.
I do really like this magazine. Just started printing on pink paper for part of it. And it's like kind of a semi-transparent pink paper and they only print on one side of it. And I'm like in love with this paper. It's so cool. It's very fun to use.
It looks almost like tissue paper.
Yeah, it's like a thinner weight and but then like when you print in color on top of it, it gets like a really cool pink cast under everything. So I have kind of a pack of things that I'm interested in using, and I'm just going to start tearing them up and layering them into sort of an abstract shape. I don't think I'm going to fill, so in the other piece, I like covered the entire canvas and wrapped it around. I think because I'm working in a book, I'm just going to sort of create an organic looking shape of layers and then put the other art on top of it. So. And you can think about which way you want, if you want sort of the raw edge showing or like a crisper edge, whether you want some of the like grain of the paper, as it were, to be showing or not. I find whenever I'm ripping, the part that I rip towards me, if I'm ripping towards me, then it's going to be the white edge. If you have like a printed paper. And if I want it to be torn away, then I would tear the other direction so that I would get this crisper raw edge. And I'm going to use some printed parts, but I'm going to rotate the print into a different direction because I actually don't care about, I don't really want the words to register. I just want the print of the text to register as like shapes. So I'm going to kind of rotate that. You definitely could like pick out something that's interesting, like an actual like phrase or something like that from a magazine that you want to register as a word, but I'm just going to be using it kind of as an abstract pattern.
So you're laying everything out before you start gluing anything?
Yeah, I'm trying to get kind of a sense for how it's going to look. You definitely could just kind of dive in, but I tend to not be quite that confident. I like to get a sense. And then you can also kind of gauge how many big pieces versus little pieces that you, because you don't want it so, if I don't really like how it looks when it gets kind of tiled. I want to create more of a sense of like this larger shape. And if you know, so what I'm going to end up doing is putting sort of like a painted motif over top of all of this when I'm done to give kind of a focal point. So if you know that you're going to do that, I like it when I'm able to kind of mimic the motif. I'll probably end up doing like flowers or something on top. So I like to be able to mimic the motif in like a pattern paper if I can. So I'm going to put these smaller scale flowers in here somewhere so that then I have that reference point when I'm doing the larger scale later on. Almost there, I think. And I don't want to end up with kind of like opposite corners exactly distributed, but I do like to have kind of the tonal reference in multiple places. So you're using the same sort of colors across, but not in exact opposite corners. The threes kind of help you do that a little bit to split things out. So I use 3 different things that are in that kind of pink paper tone. They're not just like exactly spaced all across. And I feel pretty good about this shape at this point. So I'm gonna start mixing up some of my homemade Modge Podge, because I know you have real Modge Podge over there, but do not. So I have a little glass jar and I'm just gonna put a little bit of regular Elmer's glue in here and then a little bit of water until it's just a little bit runnier than regular glue. And sometimes this will take me more tries and sometimes it will take me less tries, just depending on how lucky I get. I feel pretty good about that consistency. And I can always adjust it if I don't like it. So it's just like, it is gonna drip a little bit more, but it still has a little bit of viscosity to it. It's not totally thick like regular Elmer's glue. So I'm gonna move, kind of transpose this over here so that I have a general sense of where everything was, but then start gluing some things down. So these were my first 2, so I can just leave these here. And you're gonna wanna put glue underneath and then on top as well, to help minimize the number of bubbles that you're gonna end up with. So I'm just using a regular paintbrush, just from Target. It is not fancy. And then I'm going to paint on that glue mixture. I can lay that out and put some more glue on top of that, especially on these corners. You're going to want to feel. And I'm going to use my scraper just to make sure we're totally flush against my surface. And this is not perfect paper for this project. It is like a little too thin probably, so I'll probably get some warping. But you can correct some of that by just weighting it down when you're done. I found an old card catalog card.
I wondered if that's what that was. Yep.
It is. I had taken, it was from a withdrawn book, I think, from the library, and I had taken notes on it at some point at work and taken it home. I apparently did not have a Post-it handy.
I have a few of those lying around.
But it does have a very cool, I bet I kept it because it has a very cool title. The author is Lord. The title is Lonely Vigil. It's pretty intense.
I like it. That's a pretty good one.
And it's got the old, these are the ones that were made on the typewriter. So it's got some really cool typeface on it to give it some more texture. When I first started working in the library, they still used a typewriter at the library I was working at.
I think we just got rid of the last typewriter at Brookline right when I started there.
There was absolutely no reason for my library to still have one. They had a printer and everything. They were just, the person was just still using it. She liked it. She would buy the fancy, the brand new like Avery labels and just keep going. But the power did go out on me once and I could keep cataloging. So that was an advantage. Did you pick out particular colors, Roy, that you're working with, or what is your
I have some blues and reds, blues and reds, and then I have some old thank you cards that I'm using for sort of block patterns rather than just the animals. So it's all sort of blues and browns and reds. My paper's a little large, so we'll see how it does.
And what I don't have with me today is I do not have my hair dryer or my heat gun, which is really just a fancy hair dryer for crafts. But if you do, I really like to use it for this part because you can kind of let everything, you can force everything to dry faster because I'm impatient and I don't like to wait. Especially if I'm just working in an art journal. If it's gonna have to be like beautiful and hang on the wall, then I will like be more apt to be patient, but.
I've noticed mine is bubbling a little bit. I think I might have used a little too much glue.
Yeah, I don't mind because I like the rough edges. I don't mind either. Like I'll be pretty aggressive with the scraper because even if it like tears the paper a little bit, I just kind of think it adds texture. And it's also kind of nice when it wears the paper on the edges where the paper overlaps with other paper, because it adds a little more like pattern to that as well.
With that, we got, sorry, we can straighten up. Is everything going like that?
And this was cool because it was
Oh, like
an article about Sylvia Plath. So it has like a printed copy of one of her poems that was typed on a typewriter.
Oh, very cool.
Which is very cool. And they do, and there's some old photographs as well that were printed on the pink.
you know, considered art more than others because yeah, I mean, we'll definitely consider. We'll be sure to talk. You're welcome. Well, thank you for bringing this to my attention. We'll do everything we can.
And if I
And
had
you
a
set
bigger,
out, go ahead.
oh, if I had a bigger sheet, I probably would not have planned it out quite as much as I did here. I did that because I have a very tight space and I was worried about everything fitting. But when I did the canvas one that I showed at the beginning, I did not plan everything out ahead of doing this. I also wasn't trying to create like a shape with it. So I wasn't as worried because I knew everything was going to wrap around anyway. I could wing it.
That was exactly what I was going to ask, was how far in advance you knew what you were doing.
Oh, yeah. I planned out where all of this was going to go pretty carefully, but I usually would not plan out as much. I say pretty carefully, but also I have like a big weird empty space up here that I'm gonna have to take care of in a minute. So because I started too low on my piece of paper.
It's sort of improvisational, right? So there's parts that you knew and parts that'll have to be fixed.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you're kind of smashing things together. I mean, that is like kind of the whole essence of the project. So I feel like the mistakes and tears and stuff are more they just become a part of the project as opposed to if you're trying to create something really polished. This is sort of by its nature not. I feel like that's a theme in all of these that I've been doing. I'm like, I like art projects where when I make mistakes, they're not ruined.
They're not mistakes, they're opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know if you can see, but it is cool. You can get, at least in person, you can actually get some of the words from this piece of paper, like coming through the flowers on this thinner sheet. So you kind of have new patterns generate as you go. More pink. I could just do. just don't
You said
wanna
you'll
have
weigh
it
this. What's that?
side.
So you said you'll sometimes weigh it down and press it flat at the end. What do you usually do to do that?
Oh yeah, so if you have parchment paper or like wax paper, once things are pretty dry, I'll layer that in and then just throw a bunch of books on top or board games or whatever, like sort of dense, evenly distributed weight you can find. To help, because you can see my page, the pages are all curling. So the bubbles probably won't come out if you end up with bubbles, because those will kind of firm up. But stuff like this, where it's just like the paper buckled a little bit, is very like fixable, because this is going to be able to flatten back out and not register that much. And then if you frame it, then it keeps it flat for you anyway. I added a couple more pieces up at the top too, because I didn't like how, I like that the sharp edge of the card catalog card adds like a little bit of something different, but I didn't want just a sharp corner all the way at the top. So I added some more paper just at the last second there. Kind of moving that out. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, while this kind of dries out a little bit, I'm going to mix some white paint with a little bit of water to create kind of a whitewash, so that I can kind of blend all of these elements just even a little bit more. You can leave them really disparate like this, where it's very different tones, but I kind of like to have a little bit more consistency across. And this helps too, especially if you have some stuff that's from like a magazine that's a little bit newer, or has, if you're using some stuff that's older, more vintage stuff, and some stuff that is from a glossier magazine, it will help kind of blend that disparateness too and get kind of a single tone happening, which I kind of like.
And so that's going to be white paint and water.
Yeah. White paint and a little bit of water. And you could do any kind of color cast you want. I'm using white paper as the background, so I want it to blend with that. And it's just an acrylic. And I don't mind if we get, there's already glue on all of this, so I don't mind if we get a little bit of glue in there too. I'm just gonna use the same brush. And then with a pretty dry brush, I'm gonna dip my paintbrush in, but then kind of tap it off a good amount. I'm gonna really lightly use a little bit of paint and then spread it around a fair amount, because I don't wanna lose the texture that I have here. Lose all the pattern, I just wanna like even out the finish a little. And I also don't want it perfectly even of a paint job. Like I want the paint brush, the brush strokes to register a little.
And you could do that with a different color paint if you were using a different color paper.
Yeah. Or even if you weren't, like you could have you could accentuate sort of like the shape of it by having the brush strokes just on the blank paper. Like if I want to do this with another pink or something. Do you want to show us where you're at, Roy? I don't know if you can pick yours up.
Sure.
Oh, neat.
Yeah.
Is it a hippo in the middle?
There's some rabbits. They
Oh,
say.
I thought I thought it was 2 ears of a hippo, but it is 2 sets of ears of rabbit.
Yes. Yeah.
Nice. I'm letting mine dry a little bit. While that happens, I'm gonna start. I have my paint pen. So I'm gonna get those started. But I also have some regular paint as well that I might use.
I find the gluing things together very soothing.
Yeah, we keep telling people to get, we keep pushing our audiobook for people while they're working on these. You can like, it's a very good thing to like
Sit and listen and glue.
sit and listen and glue. I think this paint pen is
I feel sold on that idea now.
Oh,
Yeah.
so hey, we actually have a question from chat. Alice wants to know, may we use tape instead of glue for doing collages?
Definitely. You're not going to have this like sort of totally smoothed down appearance. So what might be easier to like instead of, so I'm doing kind of one that's more in the style of this, where I like put glue and paint and all this stuff down. But if you are using tape, it might be a little trickier to sort of put paint and stuff on top of it. Depends on how thick you layer the paint on. You might end up with more sort of edges sticking up. And you won't have that because you're not sticking on the back, you're gonna get more buckling if you try and paint on top. If you're not putting anything liquid on the back to sort of have that surface tension underneath, it'll really like kind of seize up. So something more like this where I didn't use any paint or anything on top, I just used paper. And I'm using like a lot of the same types of concepts that we're talking about with like thinking about where you want raw edges versus cut edges. But this you could all do with tape, and you could cut the tape smaller to interconnect the pieces and things like that, or little tiny donuts to sort of get this done. I think I also have some stickers in here too. And this kind of thing I think is probably a little bit easier, but you can also just try and see how it goes, and see what sticks. I have some stamps actually that I think I'm gonna grab to find me. So I have some little letter stamps that I happen to have. And these are kind of fun to use as to create like another layer of pattern texture that kind of gives it a little more dimension. So I'm going to pick a letter that is not necessarily recognizable as a letter if you take it out of context. So I probably don't want like an R because that's like super recognizable and there's no shape of R, but like an O or an X gets used in patterns all the time. So I'm gonna grab those out of there, like an eye I think I've used before. You can like turn it sideways and take it out of context and it becomes kind of interesting. So I'm gonna use some of those with the paint that I already have mixed up. And add that kind of extra, just start putting some kind of randomized patterns on top of the layer that I have. And if you want like a crisper image, you're gonna want to use like the paint at its full thickness. If you are okay with it just kind of being a funky organic shape, you're gonna want to use the already thinned out paint. Or, you know, like the ink that maybe came with your stamp would also work. But I want to use the same white that I'm already using for that kind of consistency between. And I like to leave it kind of goopy so that you get more texture on the page. And I'm also going to use a little bit of this pink paint pen, but you could also do this with regular paint, and just kind of start making similarly kind of abstract markings. And just kind of creating like interesting texture. I'm just putting in like some lines and rectangles in the brighter pink, and then you can kind of start to see like these little polka dot images from the O's that I used. You could also just use like a pencil eraser or any kind of funky shaped thing that you don't mind getting paint on. So I'm using the end of a bone folder, which is a tool for folding paper, but it is plastic, so I know that my paint will come off of it when I'm done. To also just make some more abstract marks with the white paint that I have. a couple places. And I'm taking a look at places that I think could still use a little more paint now that things are starting to dry. Like this is still pretty starkly pink up here, so I'm gonna use some white paint to take the edge off.
And that'll sort of help soften things and blend them together a little bit.
Yeah, because I'm gonna put, and you could definitely just have just the layered paper be the sort of center point, but I'm gonna put another focal point on top of this, so I don't really want too much of the content to register because it will make it harder to focus on what I'm gonna paint on top of it. I want enough that I can tell that there's this interesting stuff behind here. I don't want to totally lose that sense, but I don't want it to be distracting from the final motif that's going on. I'll turn my thing off. You can kind of see the sideways. You can kind of see where I'm at. And while this dries, I'm going to take a look. When I'm doing this by myself, I might use, I might be Googling images of different types of things that I might want to try and mimic. I also have like a magazine with a bunch of illustrations in it to look through for just ideas of what I might want to superimpose on top of this. So I'm going to be looking kind of at those things and thinking about what I might be interested in drawing on here as the final focal point.
Christiana, why are we putting the glue on both the top and the bottom of the paper and the images?
So if you put the glue only on one of those two ends, the glue will kind of soak into, like if you ever like get paper wet, it'll soak into the bottom layer of the paper and then that will get soft, but the top will like retain its full strength or like closer to its full strength because it won't be as wet. And you'll end up getting the bottom part of the paper like wrinkling, and that's going to create the bubbles and kind of funky wrinkles and fold. And the same is true of the top. So if you only put it on the top, the bottom would still be perfectly flat and all the way stretched out, and the top part would become wet and a lot softer and have more give, and so you would create that funky bubbling effect. So you want to make sure everything is saturated as best you can to keep it laying flat as you go. It's my not very scientific explanation, but that is my understanding.
I think that works.
I think that's approximately how it works. actually think I'm going to end up pulling kind of from this floral paper. That's kind of what I like the best out of looking at stuff. You could add text or something on top too. And I'm not, Roy is more of an illustrator than I am. So I'm gonna go pretty hard abstracted here. And kind of make it almost look like if you've ever seen those like hand studies where you draw your own hand and you don't pick, or you like look at someone's face and you put your pen down and don't pick it up from the paper, and create this kind of funky abstract line drawing. That is kind of just I'm gonna go for, because that is what I am capable of. But you can adjust as you will. And you could even, if you have like carbon tracing paper, it can be nice to actually just trace an abstracted like outline of something that you have in a book onto the page and then paint that in. And I'm actually just using a fancy Sharpie. My black paint pen is not working today.
So that's just a Sharpie?
Yeah. It looks fancy, but it's just a Sharpie. And just to give it some balance, I added like a little flower bud type thing at the top here, so that I don't just have all of the color coming from one direction. And then when I'm reasonably happy with that, I'm going to go back in with some paint pens and some paint and actually put little bits of color into that motif as well to kind of help it pop some more off the page. So I like to kind of treat it like a coloring page and just fill in pieces. I've seen people do these where they actually use like a where they use gold leaf, or like I have some embossing powder that I think would be really cool to throw on top.
Is embossing powder?
Embossing powder is this, it comes in little jars of powder, and you get it with either a pen with some special ink in it, or an ink pad with special ink, and you can use your stamps with it. So you can rubber stamp a pattern and then sprinkle this special powder that looks like really super fine glitter. And then when you apply heat to it, that glitter actually just like melts into a single like smooth surface. And it's usually metallic. It's used on cards a lot. It is very fun to use, but would work really well for this. And you can add a metallic finish or something.
Very cool.
It's very good.
I have a question.
Oh yeah.
I have a question from Will. He wants to know if you've read any good books lately.
I have. I just finished Maureen Johnson's. She's been writing this trilogy. She's a YA author, and she was writing her first murder mystery series. So I just finished the third book, and it was great. So, and it was the trilogy. So I got to find out who did it after 3 years of waiting for books. So that was very satisfying. I have not read a book. I haven't read a series where I'd wait for the next one in a while, and now I have a couple, and it was very brutal to have to sit around and wait. But I did thankfully have that book. So it is called, the first one is, now you're testing me. The third one is The Hand on the Wall, because it's behind me, so I can see it. The first one is called Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. I think that was my cat. Doing something.
I am terrible about reading series before the final book comes out. I hate it because I always have to reread the other books in the series when a new one comes out. So I always end up feeling like I have to reread everything.
What have you read recently, Rye?
What have I read recently? I just finished a sci-fi book, and I cannot remember the name of it, so I'm gonna have to take a look and see if it's in my holds. 1 second here. So I also just finished Provenance. So Anne Leckie is a sci-fi writer. She wrote Ancillary Justice, Ancillary Mercy, and Ancillary Sword, which is part of a sci-fi trilogy called the Ratch Trilogy. It won a Hugo Award for the first book. It was great. And Provenance was a sort of side entry in that series, which was really good. It's sort of like Sense and Sensibility in Space, I think is how I described it. So it's a lot of comedy of errors and manners and things like that, but set in a sort of space opera setting. So if you ever read, Pride and Prejudice and thought this would be so much better on spaceships, then this is definitely the book series for you.
I like that. That sounds great. I feel like I would like Pride and Prejudice in space.
I think I may have used too much glue. Mine feels very
so kind of tacky.
A little tacky. I'm not sure I could draw on it with markers right now. But I found some green tissue paper. That seems like that's helped a little bit. I like that.
I'm just layering some more paint into my little very abstract flower here.
So you just sort of keep going until you feel like you've reached some point. How do
Yeah,
you know when you're done?
like I'm tired of messing with it. Seems good. I think stopping is hard. But I don't like to have so many details that it's like that you kind of lose the center point.
Mhm.
So sometimes I will go back and like just remove details even by painting back over things. We're like combining some lines. So I'm gonna go in now that things are a little drier, my marker's sticking a little better, and I'm going back in and kind of cleaning up a little bit of my original abstracted lines here. Help them pop a little more off the page. I'm just tracing back over them. And I could also just do this with black paint too, because normally that's what I would use.
I like the flowers coming off the top there.
Thank you. I think the bud turned out a little better than the one on the top. They're still sideways, but I feel pretty good about that. For
Well,
a
I didn't leave much.
very quick flower.
Yeah, I don't think I left enough room for drawings on mine, but I did find a nice owl to add to it. So I'm feeling pretty good about it.
Okay. Do you want to, we're getting close. Do you want to show off what you finished? I'm going to switch my camera.
Sure.
Nice. I do like your
I don't know
owl.
if you can see. There's some little green at the bottom, so I got a like grass thing going on.
It matches the wall behind you. You have owls.
There are a lot of owls in my apartment. Actually, there are paintings of owls all over the place too. As you can see, actually behind the other owl. Yeah.
So hopefully it doesn't drip. But ooh, there we go. So this is kind of my finished little guy.
Looks great.
So the light's a little bright in here, so it's a little tricky to read all the tones, I think. But I might go back in. I think the black up here is not quite registering, but it's still a little wet, so I might go back in there a little later. But that was pretty fun. Thank you for joining me, Roy.
My pleasure. Jess says so pretty. She really likes the
Is
finished
that
work there.
librarian dress or is it another dress?
Doesn't say. Just says Jess.
I don't know. Thank you all again for joining us today to do a little bit of art, a little bit of ideaSPACE on the go here. And we'll be back again next week. I believe we'll be making crochet and knit ear sealers. So we'll be making those either for yourself if you're using a mask right now that has ear loops and it's uncomfortable. It's a little piece of something to go around the back of your head so you can attach this little ear loop to that instead of to your ears where they get tugged on, or if you know anybody in healthcare who might like one as a gift right now, that's what we'll be learning how to do next week. So thanks so much. Have a good day.